You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
So, Carol, we're pretty much through earnings season.
Yeah.
And like last quarter, one theme has been clear. It was clear today even with MongoDB's results, right?
That's right.
Companies of all stripes are embracing AI, and for good reason. Take Wall Street, for example. Banks using generative AI tools could boost their earnings by as much as $340 billion annually through increased productivity. It's a 9 to 15% increase in operating profits. That's according, we should note, to a McKinsey Global Institute report that was published today.
Yeah, well,
and they kind of want you to use AI because then you'll hire them.
Consult me, we'll tell you how you can max
Exactly.
out AI. All right, well, we've got a great guest to give us an idea, though, of where companies are going to be spending money when it comes to IT in the new year. Crawford Del Prete back with us, president of the global market intelligence firm IDC, International Data Corporation, also known as. He joins us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio at Bloomberg headquarters. Hello, hello. Almost Happy New Year.
So great to see you guys.
So great to have you here. How are you thinking about 2024?
So when we think about 2024, it's a year of transition for tech. 2023 was a year that people were extremely concerned about inflation. They were extremely concerned about the impact of inflation on tech. And at the end of the day, we'll see tech spending around about 5%, which continues the trend that tech is just so core to what companies do.
5% for next year or this year?
5% for 2023.
Okay.
When you say tech spending, what is the umbrella that covers?
So think about information technology spending. So everything from devices like personal compute devices all the way through application software, all the way through the
Hardware,
cloud,
software, all of it.
and services.
What about cybersecurity services?
Security's in there. Any IT and professional.
And this
services.
is across.
This is
in
across the
general?
world.
Okay.
It's across all regions.
I would think it'd be higher.
Is 5% a lot?
Yeah, so 5%. We saw it ramp up to double that. During COVID, when we saw things accelerate, but we've seen it bounce in that 5 to 8% range. It's been pretty range bound for quite some time. If you take out sort of the 2008 downturn, if you take out the craziness that happened during COVID.
What kind of growth were we seeing prior to the pandemic, the year before?
So prior to the pandemic, like I said, we saw that in those years it was about 7%.
Oh, it was about 7%.
So it was kind of in that range.
Okay.
Why isn't it higher? Why hasn't it grown as we've become more reliant on tech?
Every company's a tech
because the
company.
tech you think about is the new hot thing. And that stuff is growing, right? So application software, 10%. And we've seen, you think about the cloud, 30% growth, now cooling to
so
high
companies are
teens.
spending less on, let's say, a PC for every person because they've come down in price. These are commodities, and they're spending more on the cybersecurity stuff that keeps their.
So it's actually worse than that. And if you look at something like 2023, IT spending growth in PCs got shellacked. It was down 14%. It was down dramatically. Now, PCs are actually a thing that move the needle because every man, woman, and child needs a PC needs to be connected to the internet, and they spend somewhere between $800 to $1,200 on a PC. So as PCs start to come back, which we think that they will next year, they actually move the needle on IT demand. It's not uncommon to see them move the needle a couple percentage points.
Why are they coming back next year?
They're coming back next year because we saw this huge increase during the pandemic, and they start to get old, and they start to age, and they break, and people need to start replacing them. As well, there'll be a Windows 11 upgrade cycle next year, and we'll start to see new PCs that actually bring, wait for it, AI out to the edge. So you see a coprocessor which will be able to run AI workloads, and we think that will start to fuel, by the middle of next year, another upgrade cycle.
What? Why are you
No,
smiling?
it's just like it's like what's old is new again, except for what's not old, which is AI. I'm just really surprised that we're not seeing the spend as a bigger portion of revenue right now. Partly because our jobs everywhere have become so much more reliant on tech. Tech is no longer a segment. It's this layer that sort of every company needs it.
And that's why it used to be that when GDP got the sniffles, tech would get pneumonia. Tech would collapse, everyone would pull away.
Right.
That's no longer happening now. So even though we've seen pullbacks, even in COVID, where we saw GDP go negative, IT never went negative. IT went down to about 1% growth. So again, it's that point, Tim, that people still have to invest in IT. And for the technologies that are this part of the central nervous system of an organization, like application software, you're not going to get it out. You might cut down the number of users with access to it, but you're not going to get it out of the organization.
How much uncertainty is there among companies, the global corporate community, when it comes to the IT spend and like pulling the button and saying we're going to make the spend? Or are they just nervous about kind of what's to come?
So the spend falls in a couple of categories. There are definitely areas where you can pump the brakes. You know what? Push that server a little bit longer. Don't replace it. Maybe we don't run that program to add a new application, so our cloud spend doesn't go up. But when you get into the core stuff that's running the business, not a lot. Companies need to continue to invest.
I guess what I was trying to get to, Crawford, is this whole idea of just all the geopolitical uncertainty, and it just feels like when we get through kind of one phase, something new comes, and obviously, whether it's Russia, Ukraine, whether it's right now Israel, Hamas. Continued tensions, even though some things feel a little bit better between U.S. and China, they're still there. So I'm just wondering how much of the geopolitical, if at all, impacts the IT spend.
It does impact IT spend. Things like energy prices are definitely a headwind, and we see that in certain regions. Inflation can be a significant headwind. I mean, a company is dealing with a bag of money that they have to spend, so they definitely will pull back in inflationary times, and that was a lot of the trepidation that we saw this year, where we thought at the beginning of the year, boy, we could really see the market pull back in an inflationary environment.
So backs off in 2024?
So I think when you look at 2024, you'll actually see more of a recovery. Our expectation is, back to Tim's point, we'll see a little stronger growth, and that'll be fueled by PC upgrade cycle, a moderation of the pullback in the cloud. Again, cloud went from infrastructure as a service went from 30% spending this year down to about 18% spending. So that'll come back and be over 20 next year. And we heard a lot about that. Pull back with things like Azure, pull back with things like AWS. We're going to see that start to moderate as companies, to your point, Carol, need to start investing again.
But don't some of these cloud service providers don't you increase usage of them when business increases? Like if you're Netflix and you're using a cloud service provider as a CDN, right? Or to help you with your CDN and deliver content everywhere. The more people who are signed up for Netflix means the more people are streaming content, which means your bills with the cloud provider are going to go up. So it's not necessarily a choice you have whether you're going to invest or not.
That's right. And so that's a business that is born on the cloud, and everything about their business is associated with the cloud. So as they've ramped their business up, they've been all in on the cloud. But if you take a company, and again, making this up, but if you take a company like an American Express, they might decide in tough times, you know what, we're not going to invest in that incremental program in the cloud. We're going to just stay where we're going to close to stay where we are, and therefore that incremental dollar doesn't necessarily get spent. So you really have to think about companies in multiple categories. Yes, there are companies like Netflix that were born on the cloud. Everything they do is there. There are other companies that are continuing to move to the cloud, and they may choose to move a little slower.
As you think about next year, are you more optimistic or less optimistic?
Oh, absolutely. We are a little bit more optimistic. We feel like every day the lane associated with a soft landing gets a little bit wider. We see companies getting more confident in their spending, and that's why we're confident that we'll probably see, again, a couple more percentage points growth next year and recovery in some key categories. We'll see stability in software, we'll see recovery in devices, and we'll likely see areas that have been infrastructure bound, like server and storage, be fairly steady.
So when people talk about recession, are you like, based on what I'm seeing in terms of the expected IT spend, you say no?
Yeah, we see that as there's definitely a downside scenario associated with it, but we see it as a lower probability at this time.
Or lower probability in terms of recession.
In lower probability in terms of a negative impact on IT associated with a recession.
All right, we're going to continue. I feel like there's more that we want to talk about in terms of AI, and I'm just curious. Also as you talk to a lot of the clients and customers out there, just kind of some of the things that are top of mind for them. So we're going to come back with Crawford Del Prete. He's president at IDC, International Data Corporation, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Because I'm thinking about, Tim, we're just coming off of all of the software, the application software companies. You know, we've been going through their earnings reports. Many of these names have been on fire this year.
Yeah, they have. But there's also some startups that have been struggling in the space too, which I find really interesting. They've been doing layoffs and have trouble raising money as well.
Crawford Del Prete still with us, president at IDC, global market intelligence firm, and he is still with us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio.
Can we talk AI?
Yeah, but I want to ask you.
Okay, sorry, that's what I want to talk about.
I do care about spend, but I am curious because you guys consult, you talk with clients. What's the constructive conversation to be having around AI right now? What are you hearing from those clients?
I think what customers are starting to get into now are we're sort of beyond kind of the big mind art of the possible. And we're now getting into how can I actually apply AI to my business and what are the barriers associated with AI. So a lot of the axioms that have always applied to tech apply here, which is, things like garbage in, garbage out. You got to get your data organized. You've got to understand how to structure your data in order to make sense and in order to be able to synthesize your data, in order to make better decisions with your data. And so we're spending a lot of time talking with customers around the choices they make around their data, how they invest in their data, and how they can really think about structuring it for a world where they're going to be making decisions that they're potentially synthesizing and getting output from AI.
Carol knows this. I've been completely obsessed with the sort of two different schools of thought when it comes to the development of artificial general intelligence, AGI, especially in the wake of everything that happened at OpenAI. Sam Altman, you came on and spoke to us during that crisis. I don't know if I could call it a crisis, actually, during the drama. Let's call it drama.
The thing.
The thing, yeah. Right. Are you spend, you're in this day in and day out. Is there any sort of reality to the idea that artificial general intelligence is something we as a human species should be concerned about?
Oh, absolutely. There is. It's going to take a while for us to get to that point. And I think that seeing companies start to come together and have a discussion around the responsibility and not necessarily doing it after the horses have left the proverbial barn is very, very important. And I think we're starting to be able to elevate that discussion. But I definitely believe that the ability to do harm and the ability to spin people up with misinformation, those are things you can just start to see on the horizon, where we really have to think about what is the provenance of that decision or of that data. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think we're going to see governments start to require, okay, you've been told something, but what was the source of that? Where did that information come from?
Sounds like journalism.
A little bit.
No, I mean, a lot of it. Like I used to think about when I started, this idea, you had to know what the source of the material was, right? And whether it was a perspective or point of view, so subjective versus objective, or data points, who supplied it. So it's kind of interesting to hear you say that. But I do wonder, what's it going to take, Crawford? Are we going to be kind of chasing just like we were in social media, right? Where's the policing still
sadly,
there?
I think companies are going to try to get ahead of this. I think governments are going to try to get ahead of it, but we are going to be chasing it for a long time. I mean, what happens when someone can apply AI to a social engineering piece of ransomware that works really, really well, and I'd like to have 30 by tomorrow morning? What happens when someone can say, "Ooh, you know what? If I alter the code of that genome, I can create a new kind of a virus, and I'd like 10,000 by tomorrow." These are the really horrible things that people could do with generative AI to really think about setting loose a new generation of malware in a way we're not really thinking about.
Each example that you bring up has a person behind it making a decision to actually do that.
Yeah.
What about that science fiction scenario where literally the robots become more powerful than us?
Yeah.
Because they can think, because they can reason.
So when you start to get to broad AGI, if you will, that is a risk where when you're dealing with massive amounts of information and the machine starts deciding what's right and what's wrong, then you're into that zone. And you're into that zone of, well, wait a minute, what do you mean my credentials don't work? Because now I've been decided that I'm a person who shouldn't be included in this place, in the airport, on the plane, in some safe place. Make up your science fiction scenario. But when you start dealing with huge volumes of information and instantaneously making those kinds of decisions, things get a little bit dodgy.
Isn't it kind of sort of the problem with self-driving cars, right? Dog on the right, woman with a stroller on the left.
Absolutely.
Like, how does it determine?
And someone,
it's going to hit something.
Right.
How does it make that decision?
Right. And so someone has to write that code and get to a point where that decision can be made. But eventually, there's a set of parameters and rules associated with decisions like that, and the machine has to decide.
Are you worried because of warfare?
I'm sorry?
Military warfare?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, these are the kinds of things that bad actors can capitalize on, and bad actors sometimes get aggregated and it becomes a bad nation.
Think of the drone story that we did.
I know, and I go back to the Elon Musk conversation that he had at the DealBook Summit at the New York Times last week. Yeah. He said that, the government doesn't allow you to build a nuclear weapon in your backyard. There are guardrails and rules and regulations. He thinks this is more dangerous than a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and I think he's jumping ahead a number of steps. But I think if you walk back from that, putting the bullets in one hand and the gun in the other, and being able to say, okay, I'm going to give you the tools to load those together and eventually start shooting, he's not completely wrong in terms of where you can draw the line to. And so I agree that we have to be really mindful as governments to think about not letting these circumstances happen. And unfortunately, Carol, I'll take the conversation back to something that you asked, which is, are we going to be playing catch up? And I think the answer is more often than not, we are going to be playing catch up, because the number of situations and the number of instances is just so vast. And we just don't know how wide that spectrum can get.
That's a little sobering. Do you think the good will outweigh the concerns?
Okay.
And just got about 30 seconds.
Yeah. So I believe we are going to go through a very, very difficult period where work and jobs get redefined. And there are a lot of roles and a lot of jobs that are going to be threatened by AI. Think about the legal profession. Think about paralegals. Think about accountants. Think about those kinds of areas. We will then invent new jobs that can stand on the shoulders of AI, and people will be reskilled, and that will be a great time.
Who created Waze, or co-founder, he was kind of saying a very similar thing.
Absolutely. There's going to be a period of pain associated with AI that will, I think, lead to a period of tremendous growth.
But there's also responsibility that comes along with
100%.
any technology. Happy New Year. Be well.
Great
Crawford Del Prete, IDC. Thank you.